Welcome to the Money Pickle Podcast, where you can listen and learn about money without falling asleep. And if you ever need a better understanding of your financial situation, or maybe you just need a second opinion, head to moneypickle.com and schedule a free 45-minute video meeting with one of our vetted and experienced financial professionals. And with that said, let's dive into the episode. Welcome back to the Money Pickle Podcast. Today we are going to cover some topics about retirement again, mistakes you can make beforehand, mistakes you can make in retirement, and things that can hinder the way you go about retirement once you're in it. So Mason and Ryan, do you guys have any recent experiences or past experiences with clients of yours, prospective clients, or people just coming to you for a helping hand that, you know, they're worried that they may have made a mistake in their retirement?
Yeah. Well, thanks for having us on the podcast. Appreciate it. One thing comes to mind that I think can shock some people, certainly kind of as they're approaching retirement, but also in retirement, is just not having a good handle on truly what you want to spend every month. Kind of being shocked on that, overlooking some things like, if you retire before the age of 65 and you don't have an employer that will, have like a healthcare bucket that you could go on, you might need to get marketplace healthcare, which is really expensive. A lot of people don't budget enough for that. I mean, that could be, $750 to $1,000 or $1,200 a person, even more if it's a family. That's something that a lot of people overlook. They have to start draining a lot of their accounts. So that's a huge variable. You really want a good handle on, before you retire, how much you want to spend. And, you need to kind of do a gut check and obviously some financial checks on whether or not it is, feasible to take out that, $4,000 a month and where you're going to get it.
And, when Mason's talking about expenses, nobody wants to put together a budget. It's very lengthy. It's hard. It's difficult to do. But having a general idea of what you're going to spend is really helpful because you can compare it with the income streams that you're going to have when you jump into retirement. Are you going to have a pension? When are you going to start Social Security? Are you going to start withdrawing from your savings to cover expenses? These different things in balance with your expenses are difficult to plan out until you're actually in retirement. And if we're going to have to rely on the savings, the 401k, the IRA, whatever savings vehicle that may be, are you segmenting it correctly? Are you allocated correctly? You don't want to go into retirement and be fully growth oriented and have something in the market dictate what you're able to spend in retirement. If you're jumping into, if you had retired last year, the market takes a downturn. If you're growth oriented, your account's down 20%, that can severely hinder the amount of income you're able to take from your investments. So I think a balance between knowing where your income's going to come from, how much you're going to spend is difficult to grasp for a lot of people.
So obviously there's aspects of the market that no one can predict. No one knows the future. But what are like some fixed costs, not fixed, but big purchases that you see are very common in retirement, whether that's putting a bulk of money into mutual funds or real estate or hard assets or certain things that, they should put their money in.
Yeah, that can mean a number of things. So, to Ryan's point about, retiring last year, during a downturn, I mean, if people we really like to do a bucket strategy. So allocate different chunks of money, invest it differently for different time periods of your life. Everybody kind of has these three buckets: now, soon, and later. A lot of people have, some now money, which is like a bank account, a CD, just fully liquid. And then a lot of people, first of all, keep a minimal amount in that bucket. Then everything else is the later bucket. Well, we forget about probably the most important or difficult bucket, certainly to plan for, which is the soon bucket. That's like, hey, I'm retiring. I don't have $500,000 in my bank to withdraw over the next, 10 years or whatever the number is. You need to allocate some of your, bucket that's been probably set up with the growth dial turned up. We need to take our foot off the gas pedal most likely to protect against needing to pull from an account that gets, potentially slashed 20% in the market. That's the soon bucket. So, I see a number of people go right from the accumulation phase to the distribution phase. I mean, they think it's like a light switch, like, okay, I'm going to grow nicely all the way up until the last second, then I'm going to take my foot off the gas. Well, that's just market timing. And, you don't know what's going to happen in that year or, the year after. And that kind of segues into, people, like you said, putting all their eggs in one basket, whether that's, too growth oriented or, you mentioned, fixed indexed accounts, like, fixed index annuity or something like that. A lot of people will, be, I'll say, sold one of those, and it doesn't really, it's not cohesive with the overall kind of plan and liquidity. It's more so like, hey, this is a good, idea. Let me put all my money in this thing. Well, a lot of times those lack some liquidity. So here, people put all their life savings into something that now restricts how much you could take out of it. And, hey, I'm spending $5,000 a month, but I can only take out $3,000 a month from this investment because it's tied up.
And I think one of the biggest things that you have to navigate in retirement is sequence of returns risk. A lot of people might be familiar with it. It essentially is just not having the market dictate your retirement, right? If sequence of returns risk simply means that if you're taking money out of an account that's down, it takes it that much longer to grow back to where it was, right? So taking money out of an account that's down is making it much more difficult to recoup your loss, right? Market not dictating your retirement, you just got to be careful when you're allocating your accounts, when you're providing yourself income through your retirement, through your investments. It's one of the biggest things that I think you can get burned with is if, like Mason said, you're on the gas, and then at the last minute you flip the switch and you're immediately withdrawing. That is not a healthy financial plan. That's market timing. We work in the industry and we won't touch market timing, right? It's not a feasible option. And to Mason's point about the soon bucket, the most important one that most people kind of overlook, when you're approaching retirement, there's a lot of things that when people are working, they don't do, right? Most commonly I hear work around the house, right? When you retire, whether you got to get new windows, you need a new driveway, gutters, whatever it may be, lengthy, expensive purchases. A lot of people think, let's get those out of the way at the very beginning of retirement. Well, how are you going to cover those, right? Is it going to come from the bank? Is it going to come from your investments? Those are things that if I was sitting in a client's shoes, I would try and get out of the way before I retire, where I still have a consistent income stream and not solely rely on everything that I've saved, especially if the accounts are going to be down. A big lump sum distribution like that is, one, a taxable event to you, and two, can really hinder account balances and growth going forward.
Very interesting. And one thing when you guys were talking about these different accounts and investments, it got me thinking, is there certain things, like, so say for fun money, do you want to pull from your savings? For healthcare, do you want to pull from your 401k? For other expenses around the house, like fixing your bathroom, driveway, windows, you name it, do you pull from another account? Is there certain things that are better to pull from for certain expenses and costs in retirement? Or is it like how would you go about pulling money from an annuity, because you said they're fixed and it sometimes is not the best option for people?
Yeah, it's a really good question. There are a couple, and feel free to build off this, Ryan. There are a couple variables to think about. One, going back to the bucket strategy, we generally like to pull from a conservative bucket. Get in the habit of, again, the soon bucket. That's where we're going to take income from. It's kind of our all-weather portfolio. If the market does go down, that's not to say your soon bucket can't. Just hopefully it was designed to go down less. So to Ryan's point, we're not pulling out so much and we make the math really hard to ever recoup that money. So pulling out from a conservative portfolio. So that would kind of be one decision. If the market's down, we want to take from something that's conservative. If the market is up substantially, for example, okay, then maybe we do have a little bit more flexibility. Maybe we, can still pull from a conservative bucket, but maybe we, might want to use the opportunity to take some chips off the table with something that now has a pretty big gain. But what we need to overlay on top of that, that's just, the type of the investment, the type of account that we pull from is also important. So that's now coming at it from a tax perspective. So it's impossible to say that, hey, take everything from your 401k if you need, $60,000 to live off of, because, depending on where your other income's coming from, what if, if you take 60 grand from a 401k, what if, $40,000 of that was in a 12% bracket, but then the extra 20 was now in a 22% bracket? Maybe we should have picked on some other accounts if we had some available to minimize, the tax impact. So it's, what type of, an annuity, like your example, that's maybe you could, touch on that, Ryan. That's just a type of investment. They could be conservative or growth oriented. It's not easy to say that, hey, definitely take from the annuity first. We want to take from a smart investment, so to speak, based on what the market's doing, and then a smart tax perspective, take tax smart distributions.
Yeah. In terms of annuities, I think the best way to describe them is, you can have a teacup poodle, or you can have a Bernese Mountain Dog, and everything in between. That's annuities. There are many, many different kinds of annuities with many different purposes. To say, we're going to draw it from this annuity, may or may not be the best place to do it. There's an importance to allocating accounts in order to supplement income, but to Mason's point, it's not just the asset allocation that's important. It's the tax perspective too. Different accounts have different tax implications when withdrawing. Your Roth IRAs are going to be tax-free to you. Your IRA, your 401k are going to be taxed as ordinary income. Non-qualified accounts or your brokerage accounts, those are capital gains tax brackets, totally different. A combination of all these different types of accounts, coming from a bank account, coming from investments, whether it's taxable to you as income, whether it's taxable to you as a short-term or long-term gain. All these different factors go into finding the place to supplement your income, right? What's that emergency bucket going to be if, something happens in the house or healthcare or whatever it may be? Where are we going to take it where it's most efficient for the growth in the portfolio, but most efficient for your taxes come April?
Okay. The last thing I want to touch on regarding this, you said the now, soon, later bucket. What percent, is there a percentage that you have in the later? Is there a percentage you have in the soon? Is there a percentage you have in the now? And what does that look like?
It's a really good question. It's more so of a calculation for each person. So like this is more of an art than a science, as really all of this is. Depending on kind of what your lifestyle looks like and how much you want to spend. A lot of times it's like 5 to 7 years of retirement expenses might go in the soon bucket. So that could mean 50 grand for some people. That could mean $328,000, in the soon bucket. So I'd say it's more so how many years do we want to, fund? And a lot of people might say, well, I don't know, how much do you suggest? Well, sometimes we kind of have to overlay, how conservative or growth oriented might somebody be? I could sit here and say, hey, you should have X amount in the soon bucket and X amount in the later bucket. And this should be, really conservative and that really growth oriented. But, somebody might get really nervous, at something that's growth oriented. Generally, the more, you're turning on the dial or pushing on the gas pedal for growth, the more you're going to risk and put it on the line too. So some people, if we do all the analysis and run their financial plan and, hey, they're never going to, likely run out of money at a 3% rate of return, maybe we don't need to try and hit a home run or even a triple. Maybe we try and just hit consistent singles and doubles in both buckets, So I don't know if you want to add anything on that, but it's kind of
it's
individualized.
It's pretty individual. It's just, I think it's important to note that the whole point of a solid and strong financial plan is to not have to worry about it, right? To not have to fear what's going on in the economy, in the market, in the world, that you're going to still be financially independent and comfortable in retirement. And it's Mason and I can sit up here and talk about a numbers game all day, but there's a behavioral and emotional part of investing. And if, the financial plan and the numbers are solid, but you're losing sleep at night because, you're invested more heavily into equities or a certain sector than you want to be, that's where you have to find a balance, right? And that's, I think, with each individual client is something that we have to evaluate and discuss and put together a plan that suits everybody's needs. What I have seen is people that go into retirement that don't have, hobbies or different things to keep themselves busy that end up going back to work to fill time. Obviously not into the same job that they may have worked for the last 20 or 30 years, but recently we had a client this summer that essentially got bored and now works as a starter at a golf course. Just to stay busy, enjoys it during the summer. Actually, uses all the earned income that he has to contribute into his Roth IRA for an inheritance and estate planning play. But I've never personally had somebody go back because the way that they're spending compromised the strength and stability of their retirement. But it's more common than not that people that go back to work do it because they want to fill the time.
Yeah, there's a good friend of ours. I remember his dad retired through a big party, and he was enjoying retirement and had the money for retirement, but went back to work 6 months later because he was just losing his mind. And he's working a full-time job again just because he wants to, because he was just going crazy.
Yeah, a lot of people do, and then a lot of times that kind of retiring and then going back to work, and some people retire and go back to work for like a competitor company. I mean, it's literally full-time similar work, but now they have the mental freedom that, hey, I kind of retired once. I'm more so doing this for, hopefully fun. Some people, I mean, yeah, they're nervous about finances, or they feel underprepared, or we run their financial planning graph and the margins are kind of slim, out there in our, mid 80s, late 80s, early 90s. I think that does give some people a level of comfort, but yeah, certainly a lot of people do it just to keep their mind sharp. I will see, to kind of go back to your question, I will see that, you had asked people going back to work. I see it kind of in a different form sometimes, which is people will continue working even though they can totally financially retire. And, they're super nervous. They don't feel prepared, even though the graphs and all the ways to cut and slice it, look really good. And then that's, kind of a different type of coaching of, well, you kind of understand that, you're working for free right now. You based on what you want to spend, you're probably never going to spend this money. It's really just kind of building more nest egg for, the next generation. And that's great. That's important to some people. But some people, when you kind of phrase it in that way, like, hey, if you want to spend $5,000 a month, your assets just look like they're going to keep climbing unless something, big catastrophic happens. That will help some people over the edge too and say, okay, fine, I don't want to work for free. I do want to go be a starter at a golf course now or something like that. Yeah.
That is what sometimes, when I go golf and there's just an older gentleman there, it's just, he's in the best mood and he's there at 5:00 in the morning, just ready to start yelling at kids our age to get going on the golf course.
I think I'd enjoy cutting the lawns on a golf course, just a cup of coffee. You're just mowing the greens at 5. I can see that being enjoyable.
You got your headset on, yeah. Not a worry in the world. So we've talked about a lot of people that will build their assets in order to set up the next generation. Have you guys ever dealt with someone that wants to burn everything until the last day, and then so when they're done, they got nothing left in the tank?
I think it's far less common. There are some people that maybe they don't have children, or that are not close with family, that essentially want the last check to bounce. Generally speaking, if there's going to be a big party at the end of the year and their last check's going to bounce, I want to be invited to it. It sounds like it'll be pretty fun, but most people, I think, if eligible, would like to pass on some to the next generation. But I've seen it before.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and when it's a really good point and question that you bring up, because that's an important question for Ryan and I to ask. When people are asking how much can I afford to spend, well, we can, model out. Obviously, there's always variables that can come out of left field, but we can try and model out making the last check bounce and what that, your max amount of budget or spending. And, that might make some people nervous, again, running really slim margins out there. What if with modern medicine, what if we live till age 105 or something different than our parents did, But I think that, I need to help people answer that question. A lot of times I say, I'll ask them, do you want to leave an inheritance? And, oh, well, maybe it might be nice. And then I kind of rephrase it. I said, okay, let me ask it in this way. Would you be happy if something is left over and that would make you feel good, but you want to make sure that you're taken care of first and that you're going to have plenty of money to live off of? And people just, bingo, that is my response. If it happens, great. But I do want to make sure that I have a good retirement and, that I'm economically sound. I don't just want to start giving all my money or do, prep for that being inherited, so that's a common answer too.
And what I see quite a bit is with a lot of our older clients that have been in retirement for quite a while, coming up on, average life expectancy, when we're having client reviews and we're meeting with them, we like to get the younger generation involved. We like to get their kids involved. And most commonly you'll hear from every kid that's in on those meetings is, this is your money. You can spend it, right? We're financially okay. Spend the money that you've worked so hard to save. And most people just won't, spending hundreds of thousands of dollars if you've done a very good job saving in your late 80s is a lot harder than you might think. Amazon's gotten very popular. I know my grandmother likes to use Amazon quite a bit, but it is still very hard to draw down on accounts like that. And, if they're going to pass money on, it's because they want to. It's not because the kids or the beneficiaries are saying, hey, mom and dad, what are you leaving us, right? Everybody wants the older generation to be able to spend their wealth, but a lot of people want to pass it on as well. So it's a good balance. It's something that we talk about quite frequently with clients, and it's different for everybody. But most commonly speaking, there are not that many people out there that are going, let's bounce that last check and go out on a high note. But more power to you if that's the plan that you're trying to accomplish.
That's one thing I've mentioned that to my dad. Like, you've done so well saving and investing and keeping it close to the chest for your whole life. Like, go do something fun, man. Go on a fun vacation. Go buy a cool car. Nope.
Savers are savers.
They are. Yeah, through and through. Ryan, being, a younger generation of advisors and seeing things as you've been in this industry through taking exams and going to seminars, talking to people on Money Pickle, whatever that may look like, what are some tips and tricks that you would suggest to people my age, late 20s, early 30s, that, they can look out for this now? They can maybe invest in this, not necessarily telling what to do, but things that, people should pay attention to.
I think two very important things that I would note. One, start putting money into a Roth IRA, even if it's $50 a month, whatever it may be. You are paying yourself forward immensely when you reach retirement. And two, a lot of the younger generation, we hold the most debt of any generation, whether it's credit card debt, student loan debt, any of those things. Student loan payments are getting unfrozen this month. Student loans have to start being paid again. Being in debt can be, from a behavioral and an emotional standpoint, very, very stressful. It's not impossible. You're not going to drown in it. Make the minimum payments. It'll go away. There's many different ways to approach debt, but consumer debt and a Roth IRA, I think, are the two biggest things to kind of, you can work them intertwined. You don't, just because you have debt doesn't mean that you can't invest in yourself in the future. So I think a good balance between those two things, and pay yourself forward.
The earlier the better. I mean, the biggest asset that younger people have, and that's obviously a relative term, is just time. The compounding interest, just the biggest variable is just the amount of time. There's staggering differences between, starting with $100 a month even at age 20 versus age 30. It seems pointless, but it's not, because once you get the ball rolling, the snowball just keeps getting bigger and bigger. So, I mean, seriously, every day, every month or year you delay, it does impact you later on down the road. To Ryan's point, yeah, there's just, there are a number of people who, we encounter who are really close to retirement, and we just hear it all the time. Like, gosh, I wish I would have, saved in a different account, like, a Roth IRA being a popular one that just hasn't been widely adopted, even though there are some, tax benefits. Obviously, you kind of got to look into it for yourself. There's a couple intricacies, but you just saving in the wrong account, thinking that things are just kind of going to work out, or whatnot, and not getting started earlier enough. Just, you could have sacrificed a little bit, gone out to eat 3 times less. Would that have changed your lifestyle? Probably not, but it could have changed your lifestyle later on down the road, because that would have been, maybe $200 a month going into something that's a substantial amount of money long term.
And one more thing I do want to add, finances much like, talking to a doctor or any of these, talking about finance can be taboo for a lot of people. It can be uncomfortable to kind of share that information with, whether it's a professional or with family or with friends. Money is a taboo topic that not a lot of people talk about. And, if you're keeping it close to your chest and you do have questions, these are the kinds of things that Mason and I talk about all the time with people. It's the reason why we go to seminars, we present to people, because there is a value in just having your questions answered, which is why I think Money Pickle's so great, is just being able to ask your question. There's no judgment. It's a professional setting, to be able to kind of ease some of the weight off your shoulders of, if you think that the walls are closing in, if you're missing out on opportunities, there's so many different things that can be overwhelming. To just get it off the chest, have it answered, and just give yourself a direction and where you need to go. And I think that's very valuable for people, especially the younger you are.